When time feels endless, it is treated carelessly. It is filled with noise, urgency, and unnecessary struggle. But as the years pass, something changes in the way time is experienced. After 60, time is no longer seen as a resource to be spent or managed. It becomes something far more precious. It becomes sacred. Each day carries weight. Each hour carries meaning. The illusion of later slowly disappears, and in its place comes a deep awareness of now. In earlier years, time is often exchanged for ambition. Long hours are given to goals, recognition, and survival. The mind is always ahead of the present moment, chasing what comes next. But after decades of chasing, the body and mind begin to ask a quieter question. Is this moment being lived or merely passed through? This question alone transforms the relationship with time. You stop measuring days by productivity and start measuring them by presence. When time becomes sacred, rushing loses its appeal. There is no longer a need to fill every moment with activity. Sitting quietly in the morning light becomes enough. A slow walk becomes meaningful. A simple breath becomes complete. You realize that peace does not come from having more time, but from being fully inside the time you already have. One mindful hour carries more life than a distracted day. With this shift, priorities naturally change. Arguments that once felt urgent now feel unnecessary. Proving a point feels less important than preserving inner calm. You begin to protect your time, not with selfishness, but with wisdom. You say no more often, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for your remaining energy. Time is no longer something to give away carelessly, because you understand that every moment given is a moment of life itself. This awareness also softens regret. When time is limited, the mind stops replaying the past endlessly. There is less energy for resentment and self-blame. You understand that what is done cannot be undone, and what is lost cannot be recovered. Instead of fighting this truth, you bow to it. Acceptance grows, not as surrender, but as clarity. You forgive yourself more easily because you understand that you were always moving with the awareness you had at that time. Sacred time also deepens relationships. Conversations slow down. Listening becomes more important than responding. You are no longer in a hurry to speak, because silence itself carries meaning. Being with someone fully, without distraction, becomes an offering. You no longer measure connection by duration, but by depth. A few honest moments feel more valuable than years of shallow interaction. As time becomes sacred, fear of aging begins to dissolve. You stop trying to outrun time and instead walk alongside it. Each wrinkle, each slowdown becomes a reminder to live gently. There is less violence toward the body and less pressure on the mind. You rest without guilt. You move without force. You honor the rhythm that life now asks of you. This reverence for time brings a quiet discipline. Waking up becomes intentional. Eating becomes mindful. Even rest becomes purposeful. You are no longer killing time, because you understand there is nothing to kill. There is only life unfolding moment by moment. Every breath becomes a reminder that this moment will never return in the same way again. When time is seen as sacred, gratitude arises naturally. Ordinary moments shine with quiet beauty. The sound of birds, the warmth of tea, the calm of evening air all become enough. You realize that life was never meant to be rushed through. It was meant to be inhabited fully, slowly, and with awareness. For most of life, the ego feels like protection. It pushes you to achieve, to be seen, to stand above others. It tells you that your value depends on recognition, strength, and control. In earlier years, this voice feels necessary. It helps you survive, compete, and build an identity in the world. But as time passes, the same voice that once motivated you begins to exhaust you. After 60, the weight of carrying an image becomes impossible to ignore. The need to prove yourself slowly reveals its true cost. It demands constant comparison. It feeds on approval. It keeps the mind restless, always checking whether it is respected, noticed, or valued. This constant inner monitoring steals peace. You begin to see that much of your tension does not come from life itself, but from the effort to protect an idea of who you think you must be. Letting go of ego does not mean becoming passive or weak. It means releasing the need to be right, superior, or admired. It means no longer measuring your worth through the eyes of others. When this need softens, something unexpected happens. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, the mind becomes quieter, there is less resistance inside, and therefore less conflict outside. After decades of experience, you start to recognize how unnecessary many struggles were. Arguments that once felt essential now feel draining. Defending your opinion no longer brings satisfaction. You understand that being right rarely brings peace, and winning an argument often costs more than it gives. The ego wants victory, but the heart wants harmony. With maturity, you choose harmony more often. As ego loosens its grip, humility arises naturally. You no longer feel threatened by differing views or younger voices. There is no urge to dominate conversations or assert authority. You listen without preparing a response. You allow silence without filling it. This creates a sense of inner stability that does not depend on external conditions. Letting go of ego also changes how you relate to mistakes. Instead of shame, there is understanding. Instead of defensiveness, there is reflection. You accept that errors are part of being human, not evidence of failure. This acceptance brings lightness. You stop carrying the heavy armor of self-justification and allow yourself to be seen as you are. There is also freedom in no longer needing recognition. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism loses its power. When approval is no longer your currency, you stop trading your peace for attention. You act according to values, not applause. This inner alignment creates a quiet confidence that does not announce itself. With less ego, compassion grows. You begin to see others not as competitors or threats, but as fellow travelers shaped by their own fears and conditioning. You become slower to judge and quicker to understand. This shift softens relationships. Interactions become simpler and more genuine because there is nothing to prove. As the ego fades, gratitude takes its place. You appreciate life without needing to claim ownership over it. Achievements are remembered without clinging. Losses are accepted without bitterness. You realize that life was never about building a perfect identity, but about learning how to live with awareness and kindness. This letting go creates space. Space for peace, space for clarity, space for being fully present without the constant background noise of self-importance. The mind becomes less crowded, the heart becomes more open, and in this openness, a deeper form of strength reveals itself, one that does not come from asserting dominance, but from resting comfortably in your own being. For much of life, the body is treated as a tool. It is pushed, demanded from, and often ignored until it breaks down. Strength is measured by how much it can endure, how far it can be pushed, and how little rest it requires. In earlier years, discomfort is seen as an obstacle to overcome, something to silence or dominate. But as the body ages, it begins to speak more clearly, and ignoring it becomes impossible. After 60, the body no longer responds to force in the same way. Recovery takes longer. Energy fluctuates. Pain appears without invitation. At first, this feels like loss, but with awareness, it reveals itself as guidance. The body is no longer asking to be conquered, it is asking to be understood. Each ache, each limitation, carries information about balance, rhythm, and care. When the body becomes a teacher, resistance softens. You stop fighting what is natural. Instead of demanding performance, you offer attention. You notice how different foods affect your energy. You feel how certain movements nourish rather than drain you. Rest stops feeling like laziness. and starts feeling like intelligence. The body teaches that sustainability is more valuable than intensity. This shift also changes how you relate to pain. Pain is no longer just an enemy to eliminate. It becomes a signal, a reminder to slow down, to adjust posture, to breathe more deeply, to release tension stored over years of stress. Listening to pain does not mean surrendering to it. It means learning from it before it grows louder. As awareness deepens, movement becomes more mindful. You no longer move to prove strength or youth. You move to maintain flow and circulation. Simple practices become powerful. Walking becomes meditation. Stretching becomes dialogue. Breathing becomes nourishment. The body responds to gentleness with cooperation. There is also humility in this relationship. You accept that the body has its own timing. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be compared to others. Aging becomes less about decline and more about adaptation. You stop measuring yourself against the past and start working with the present. This acceptance reduces frustration and opens space for appreciation. The body also reflects emotional history. Years of tension, unspoken grief, and unexpressed stress live in muscles and joints. When you slow down, these patterns become visible. Softening the body begins to soften the mind. Releasing physical tension allows emotional weight to loosen as well. The connection becomes undeniable. Caring for the body becomes a form of inner healing. Through this learning, discipline takes on a new meaning. It is no longer about control or punishment. It is about consistency and respect. Regular sleep, mindful eating, gentle movement, and quiet moments are no longer optional. They are essential practices that support clarity and stability. The body rewards attention with steadiness. Gratitude naturally arises. You begin to appreciate what the body can still do rather than mourning what it cannot. You thank your legs for carrying you, your lungs for breathing, your heart for continuing its quiet work. This gratitude changes the internal dialogue. The body is no longer criticized or blamed. It is acknowledged as a companion that has carried you through decades of experience. As this relationship deepens, fear of aging decreases. You understand that the body will change, but awareness can remain strong. You stop chasing youth and start cultivating vitality. Vitality comes not from denial of age, but from harmony with it. The body teaches patience, presence, and humility, not through words, but through sensation and limitation, guiding you toward a life lived with attentiveness and respect. For much of life, silence feels uncomfortable. It creates space where thoughts grow louder and restlessness rises. Noise becomes a way to distract the mind, to avoid what sits underneath. Conversation, music, and constant activity fill the gaps, so there is no need to face stillness. In earlier years, silence often feels like emptiness, something to escape from rather than enter. With time and experience, this perception begins to change. After 60, silence slowly reveals a different quality. It no longer feels vacant. It feels full of awareness, depth, and calm. The need to fill every moment with sound weakens, and the mind starts to settle naturally when nothing is added to it. In silence, the constant internal commentary begins to soften. Thoughts still appear, but they move more slowly. There is less urgency to follow them. You begin to notice the space between thoughts, and in that space, something stable emerges. This stability does not depend on circumstances. It exists quietly beneath the surface of experience. Silence allows you to hear what noise has been covering. Subtle emotions, unacknowledged fatigue, and quiet intuition begin to surface. Instead of reacting immediately, you observe. This observation creates distance from impulse. You respond rather than react. The mind becomes less reactive because it is no longer constantly stimulated. As silence becomes familiar, the fear of being alone with yourself fades. You realize that loneliness was not caused by solitude, but by resistance to your own inner world. Sitting quietly becomes comfortable. Being alone no longer feels like absence. It feels like returning to something intimate and familiar. In conversations, silence changes your presence. You no longer feel pressure to speak quickly or fill pauses. You allow space for others to express themselves fully. Listening becomes deeper because you are not preparing your next sentence. Words become fewer but more intentional. Silence between words carries meaning. This comfort with silence also reduces the need for explanation. You stop justifying your choices or defending your boundaries. Stillness communicates confidence more clearly than speech ever could. When you are at ease in silence, you do not need to announce your strength. It is felt. Silence also sharpens awareness of the present moment. Small details become vivid. The rhythm of breath, the weight of the body, the quality of light in a room all become noticeable. These details anchor you in now, pulling attention away from regret about the past or anxiety about the future. As the mind grows quieter, emotional turbulence loses intensity. Feelings arise, but they pass more easily. Without constant mental commentary, emotions are experienced directly and allowed to move through. There is less storytelling, less clinging, less resistance. Silence becomes a space where emotions can dissolve naturally. There is also honesty in silence. Without words to hide behind, you meet yourself as you are. There is no performance, no image to maintain. This direct meeting builds self-trust. You learn that you can sit with discomfort without escaping, and that discomfort itself is temporary. Over time, silence becomes restorative. It nourishes the nervous system and stabilizes the mind. You notice that after periods of quiet, clarity increases. Decisions feel simpler. Reactions feel slower. Life feels less overwhelming, not because problems disappear, but because the mind is no longer crowded. Silence also deepens spiritual understanding without effort. There is no need for complex ideas or explanations. Awareness itself becomes the teacher. In quiet moments, you sense a connection that does not require words. This connection is not dramatic. It is subtle, steady, and grounding. As silence becomes home, noise loses its power over you. External chaos no longer immediately disturbs inner calm. You can move through busy environments without carrying them inside. Silence stays with you even when sound is present. Like an inner anchor that keeps you centered. For much of life, silence feels uncomfortable. It creates space where thoughts grow louder and restlessness rises. Noise becomes a way to distract the mind, to avoid what sits underneath. Conversation, music, and constant activity fill the gaps, so there is no need to face stillness. In earlier years, silence often feels like emptiness, something to escape from rather than enter. With time and experience, this perception begins to change. After 60, silence slowly reveals a different quality. It no longer feels vacant. It feels full of awareness, depth, and calm. The need to fill every moment with sound weakens, and the mind starts to settle naturally when nothing is added to it. In silence, the constant internal commentary begins to soften. Thoughts still appear, but they move more slowly. There is less urgency to follow them. You begin to notice the space between thoughts, and in that space, something stable emerges. This stability does not depend on circumstances. It exists quietly beneath the surface of experience. Silence allows you to hear what noise has been covering. Subtle emotions, unacknowledged fatigue, and quiet intuition begin to surface. Instead of reacting immediately, you observe. This observation creates distance from impulse. You respond rather than react. The mind becomes less reactive because it is no longer constantly stimulated. As silence becomes familiar, the fear of being alone with yourself fades. You realize that loneliness was not caused by solitude, but by resistance to your own inner world. Sitting quietly becomes comfortable. Being alone no longer feels like absence. It feels like returning to something intimate and familiar. In conversations, silence changes your presence. You no longer feel pressure to speak quickly or fill pauses. You allow space for others to express themselves fully. Listening becomes deeper because you are not preparing your next sentence. Words become fewer but more intentional. Silence between words carries meaning. Discomfort with silence also reduces the need for explanation. You stop justifying your choices or defending your boundaries. Stillness communicates confidence more clearly than speech ever could. When you are at ease in silence, you do not need to announce your strength. It is felt that silence also sharpens awareness of the present moment. Small details become vivid. The rhythm of breath, the weight of the body, the quality of light in a room all become noticeable. These details anchor you in now, pulling attention away from regret about the past or anxiety about the future. As the mind grows quieter, emotional turbulence loses intensity. Feelings arise, but they pass more easily. Without constant mental commentary, emotions are experienced directly and allowed to move through. There is less storytelling, less clinging, less resistance. Silence becomes a space where emotions can dissolve naturally. There is also honesty in silence. Without words to hide behind, you meet yourself as you are. There is no performance, no image to maintain. This direct meeting builds self-trust. You learn that you can sit with discomfort without escaping, and that discomfort itself is temporary. Over time, silence becomes restorative. It nourishes the nervous system and stabilizes the mind. You notice that after periods of quiet, clarity increases. Decisions feel simpler. Reactions feel slower. Life feels less overwhelming, not because problems disappear, but because the mind is no longer crowded. Silence also deepens spiritual understanding without effort. There is no need for complex ideas or explanations. Awareness itself becomes the teacher. In quiet moments, you sense a connection that does not require words. This connection is not dramatic. It is subtle, steady, and grounding. Attachment often disguises itself as love, security, or necessity. It tells you that holding tightly will protect you from loss, that control will prevent pain. In earlier years, attachment feels natural and even responsible. You attach to roles, relationships, beliefs, possessions, and identities because they give structure and meaning to life. But over time, the cost of this holding becomes visible. Most suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the refusal to let them change. When something you are attached to shifts or disappears, the mind resists. It argues with reality. It demands that life remain the same. This resistance creates tension, grief, and fear. The pain is not only in the loss, but in the clinging that follows it. As life unfolds, you experience endings that cannot be avoided. People leave, bodies change, status fades, certainty dissolves. Each loss exposes the fragility of attachment. At first, this feels cruel, but gradually insight emerges. You begin to see that everything you held on to was always temporary. The suffering came from forgetting this truth, not from the impermanence itself. After years of experience, attachment reveals its deeper pattern. It is rooted in fear. Fear of being alone, fear of losing control, fear of not being enough without what you cling to. When you see this clearly, attachment loses some of its authority. You realize that what you are protecting is not the object itself, but a sense of identity built around it. Letting go does not mean withdrawing from life or becoming indifferent. It means engaging without grasping. You still care, but you no longer demand permanence. You still love, but you no longer try to possess. This shift changes the quality of experience. Joy becomes lighter. Pain becomes less overwhelming. Both are allowed to pass. As attachment loosens, fear begins to loosen with it. When you no longer depend on external conditions for stability, the mind becomes more flexible. You adapt more easily. Change no longer feels like a threat, but a natural movement of life. This adaptability reduces anxiety and brings a quiet confidence that does not rely on certainty. Attachment also shapes how you relate to the past. Memories become heavy when you cling to them. Regret grows when you replay what cannot be changed. When attachment softens, the past loses its grip. You remember without reliving. You learn without being trapped. The mind becomes less burdened by what has already ended. In relationships, reduced attachment creates healthier connection. You stop expecting others to complete you or behave according to your needs. You allow people to be who they are, not who you want them to be. This freedom reduces conflict. It creates space for respect and authenticity rather than dependency. Material attachment also loses its intensity. Possessions become tools rather than extensions of identity. You enjoy what you have without fearing its loss. Simplicity becomes appealing because it leaves less to protect. With fewer attachments, there is less mental noise and more inner space. As attachment fades, gratitude naturally takes its place. You appreciate experiences while they are present, instead of clinging to them afterward. You savor moments without trying to preserve them. This presence deepens enjoyment rather than diminishing it. There is also a deep relief in recognizing that you do not need to hold everything together. Life unfolds on its own terms. When you stop gripping tightly, energy once used for control becomes available for awareness and compassion. The heart softens. The mind becomes clearer. Suffering decreases not because life stops changing, but because resistance to change weakens for much of life. Success is measured outwardly. It is defined by what is achieved, what is owned, and how others respond to you. The world teaches early that accomplishment brings meaning and recognition brings validation. So you chase goals, build identity, and measure your worth through visible outcomes. But as time passes, especially after 60, these outer definitions begin to lose their weight, and something quieter starts to emerge as more important than everything else. Innermost peace does not arrive suddenly. It grows slowly as external desires lose their urgency. You begin to notice that achievements, while meaningful at one point, do not bring lasting satisfaction. Each milestone is followed by another desire. Each success is followed by a new form of restlessness. The cycle continues until you begin to question whether anything outside can truly complete what feels incomplete within. With experience, clarity deepens. You start to understand that peace is not something that happens after success, but something that can exist regardless of it. It is not dependent on circumstances, but on relationship with circumstances. When the mind stops chasing constant improvement or comparison, a different quality of life appears. It is quieter, slower, and more grounded. After 60, there is often a natural withdrawal from external validation. The need to prove, compete, or outperform begins to fade. This is not loss, but relief. The pressure to constantly define yourself weakens, and in its place comes a more stable awareness. You no longer need life to confirm your value, because value is no longer measured externally. Inner peace becomes visible in simple moments. Sitting without urgency, walking without destination pressure, breathing without mental clutter. These experiences, once overlooked, become central. You realize that peace was never hidden, it was simply ignored while chasing something else. When attention returns inward, it was always there, waiting beneath the noise. This shift also changes how you view struggle. Difficulties still arise, but they no longer define your state of mind. Instead of being consumed by problems, you observe them. There is less identification with what is happening and more awareness of how you are responding to it. This distance creates space, and in that space, peace can remain even when conditions are not ideal. True success becomes internal. It is no longer measured by accumulation, but by reduction. Less anger, less anxiety, less craving, less resistance. The mind becomes simpler. Thoughts slow down. Emotional reactions soften. You begin to realize that a peaceful mind is more valuable than a successful image. As this understanding deepens, relationships also transform. You engage with others without expectation of approval. You are less disturbed by disagreement or disapproval. Interactions become lighter because there is no hidden demand for validation. This reduces conflict and increases sincerity. You relate from presence rather than need. Inner peace also changes how you relate to time. There is less urgency to become something different. The future loses its pressure. The present becomes enough. You stop postponing peace for later stages of life and begin to experience it in ordinary moments. This shift dissolves the illusion that happiness exists somewhere ahead. Even challenges begin to feel different. Instead of threats, they become situations to be met with awareness. There is still effort, still responsibility, but without inner turmoil. You act without being consumed. You respond without losing balance. This stability becomes the true measure of strength. As inner peace becomes more familiar, external chaos loses influence. Life continues with its natural ups and downs, but the center remains steady. You are no longer dependent on conditions being perfect. Peace is not created by life being easy, but by the mind becoming less dependent on ease after 60. Life stops demanding that you become more and starts revealing the wisdom of becoming less. Less noise, less attachment, less ego, less chasing, less resistance. What remains is not emptiness but clarity, not loss but refinement. Each lesson points back to the same truth, that peace was never something to be achieved outside, but something to be uncovered within. Time becomes sacred, ego becomes lighter, the body becomes a teacher, silence becomes meaningful, attachment loosens its grip, and inner peace becomes the true measure of success. These are not separate ideas, but different doors leading to the same space of awareness. Nothing important is taken away in this process, only what was unnecessary. And in that removal, life becomes simpler, quieter, and more honest. The world does not change, but your relationship with it does. And in that shift, everything changes.